Hi guys, this is Lupie Sabree, and I wanted to kind of come here with you guys and create a space where we can dialogue a little bit about lupus. I was diagnosed with lupus back in, man, when was it? 2018, after the birth of my first son. Um, and I was like really shocked to find out that this could have been what's going on. It was back in 2012. Yeah, I was about to graduate. I was getting ready to study abroad in Italy, and I remember being on the soccer field. I was the camp director, and I took my kids to a soccer field, and we were playing soccer. And I fell, and when I fell, like immediately after, I felt my knee get really, really hot, and then my knee like just kind of became super inflamed, and so painful. It was the worst pain of my life up until that point because I hadn't had children yet. But it was the worst pain of my life, and I just remember like kind of not being able to walk. I was like stuck on the couch. My knee was burning all night, um, and it was just getting more and more swollen. And it got so bad, and I was like crying in pain so bad that my dad actually had to take me to the hospital because it was like just an unbearable pain. When I got to the hospital, they couldn't figure out anything that was wrong with my knee. There was no sprain, there was no bruising, there was no like apparent injury. I had X-rays done, everything. There was nothing. Um, and they put my leg in a splint. I was on crutches for like maybe 2 to 4 weeks or something like that. I remember when I went to um, my like my little meeting to get ready to go to Italy. I was still on crutches at that point, so that was about 2 weeks, and then maybe a week after that, I took the brace off, but I did still bring my splint with me to Italy just in case. Um, so yeah, that was my first like real incident of like what's going on with my body. And then after that, I probably had a break that next year from it. And then when I graduated college, I would start getting swelling in this knee, and and then it would go back and forth and back and forth. Um, but that was the only incident. So I was just like, well, maybe this is just something that happens to me. Um, and then after, when I was pregnant with my first son, I started getting like crazy, weird pains that I never had before. Like my jaw would lock up. I wouldn't like, be able to open my mouth fully. My wrists were getting swollen. My knees, of course, but that was common. My elbows were getting locked up. I couldn't fully extend my arms. So there were just a lot of crazy things happening to me that didn't really make sense for pregnancy either, where pregnancy is already such a crazy time. And so when all of those things were happening, I was like, okay, wait a minute. Like, this is more than just regular pregnancy pains. So my prenatal doctor at the time, my OBGYN, she sent me to a physical therapist. And I went to the physical therapist, and like they were, massaging my joints and giving me all of these different treatments and workouts to do. And yeah, the massages felt really, really good, but ultimately, my pain wasn't improving. After I had my son, my first son, um, those pains never really went away. It wasn't as bad as it was when I was pregnant, so perhaps there was some kind of hormonal factor that played a part in it and like flaring me up, I guess. Um, but those pains still stayed. Like I still, for a long time, had issues with my jaw. I still, for a long time, had issues in my wrists, even in my fingers here and there, and my elbows, um, and then of course in my knees. But that was like the initial issue. Um, what else? So after that, I went back. I was working from home. I had started an in-home daycare, and then I went back into the school building. I'm a teacher, and once I started that job, it was very stressful. It was my first teaching position. It was extremely stressful, and I just remember having all of these pains. And one day, the pain in my elbow was so unbearable. Like I couldn't even do my job at school. Like, teaching, you have to put up bulletin boards, you have to write on the whiteboard, you have to lift books and move desks and do all of these things. And it was really interfering with me being able to do that, because at one point both my elbow and my knee were both acting up. And so I think I went home early that day because I was in so much pain. I don't really like taking medicine, but I remember taking an ibuprofen, and even that wasn't helping too much. So I ended up going home early, and I went to urgent care on the way home. And that was the first time a doctor looked at me and said, this could be lupus. And I was like, what? I had heard of lupus before because I know a couple of people who had it. But it's like just so, it's not really talked about, I feel like, as much as it occurs. Like, I feel like it's becoming very common, but it's not talked about so much. So it's like, okay. So I started to do my research, and he referred me to a rheumatologist. And when I went to the rheumatologist, they, poked me up. That's what I call it. They ran a bunch of tests. They checked for ANA antibodies and just all of these different antibodies. And I remember leaving from getting all those tests, just like, everything's going to be fine. Regardless what happens, at least I'll know what's going on with me. I'll have answers for all of the crazy things that have been going on in my body. And so, I went, and then I came home, and I remember maybe a week later, I started to think, well, they didn't call me, so everything must be fine. And then a couple of days after that, the rheumatologist did call and tell me that I tested positive for lupus, and he wanted to do a second round of blood work just to rule out anything else. And they did, and he told me, like, some people with an autoimmune disease may have like variations, or they might have markers for certain things, but it's not kind of spot on. And he let me know that, like, for me, this was like spot on lupus. Like, I had all of the markers for lupus, and that everything, all of my symptoms and everything were very specific to lupus. And it took me a really long time to kind of accept that. I'm always someone who like doesn't really like to claim certain illnesses. Even still, I really like to look at it as this is something that you can treat with lifestyle. Sometimes you may need medicine. I will talk more about that in the next video. But I feel like a lot of these things are manageable, and a lot of these things are happening to us because of our environment, environmental factors, pollution, diet, exercise. I feel like there are a lot of factors to disease, and I know a lot of doctors and a lot of researchers and scientists also believe that same thing and have theories around that. But that's also been my experience. And I have just kind of over the years, because that was 2018, that was 2 years ago. So it's going on 3 years since my diagnosis. And I've learned a lot of things over the course of those 3 years. So I decided to, go ahead and start this channel so that I could share these things with you, and you guys can share these things with me. We could just encourage each other and learn more about this like fascinating disorder. I guess it's a disorder. I don't think it's considered a disease. I think it's called a disorder. But anyway, so yeah, that is what I wanted to discuss with you today. If you like what I'm talking about, like what I'm discussing, make sure that you subscribe to my channel so that we can continue to have this conversation together, and that we can all be a part of this journey together. All right, guys. Bye. I'll see you in the next video.